Happy New Year, everybody! I'm Mike Poland, the scientist in charge of the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory, and this is the monthly update for January 1st of 2023. It seems like a good opportunity to talk about the kinds of things we observed in Yellowstone over the course of the past year. Now, in terms of earthquake activity, it was a pretty average year. There were about 2,500 earthquakes that were located in the region during 2022. Now, over a third of those earthquakes were actually part of a single long-lived swarm near Grizzly Lake. That's between Norris Geyser Basin and Mammoth Hot Springs. There were over 1,000 earthquakes that occurred as part of this swarm, which started in late July and extended all the way into the fall. Now, that sounds sort of unusual, but it's not out of the ordinary. We see actually lots of earthquake swarms that can last for months. In fact, in 2017, there was an over 3-month-long swarm that had 2,400 earthquakes. And this is not too surprising in the region, given all the faults in the area and all the water that's moving around in the subsurface. That's just a recipe for small earthquakes. There were a few magnitude 3s, but the vast majority were magnitude 2 and below. The largest earthquake of the year was a magnitude 4.2, and that occurred in the eastern part of the park back in May, and actually felt by many of the people that are in the Yellowstone region. And that was the largest earthquake since 2017, but we get a magnitude 4 every now and then in the Yellowstone region. Deformation-wise, in terms of how the ground is moving, we saw a continuation of the sort of activity that we've seen for the last several years. The caldera region continued to slowly subside by about an inch or so per year, a couple of centimeters per year. Not much deformation in the Norris area. So it was really sort of a continuation of the kinds of patterns we've seen for several years now. Geyser activity, there wasn't a whole lot of spectacular stuff that happened. Steamboat Geyser, the tallest active geyser in the world, erupted 11 times in 2022. Now, this may seem like a lot, but it's a far cry from what we've seen in years past. In 2018, when Steamboat came alive, it had 32 eruptions. There were 48 each in 2019 and 2020, and there were 20 eruptions in 2021. So Steamboat may be on the decline right now, but hopefully it's not done giving us a show quite yet. It was also a good year for fieldwork. The Yellowstone Volcano Observatory Consortium, all of the scientists from different agencies that contribute to research in Yellowstone, got together for the first time in 4 years in May. In fact, the morning of that earthquake that occurred back in May, the 4.2 in the eastern side of the park. We talked about the kinds of science and new insights that have been enabled by all the research that's been happening in Yellowstone over the past several years. There's also been a number of new scientific experiments. For example, a new continuous gas sensor was installed near the mud volcano area this past year. There was lots of water sampling and gas sampling as well, and maintenance of seismic sites, deployment of new GPS sites. All of that sort of information will be published as results become available. Now, being the first of the year, it's also a time for resolutions, right? So what might YVO be resolving to do in the coming year? Well, that's actually detailed in a report that just came out this past year. This is the monitoring plan of the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory for how we want to better understand what's happening in the vicinity of Yellowstone National Park. We talk about the different kinds of monitoring tools we'd like to install, the different kinds of data we'd like to collect. In the coming year, our hope is to install a new multi-component monitoring station in Norris Geyser Basin, something that would measure earthquakes, something that would measure ground deformation, and also infrasound. That's low-frequency sound waves, so we can actually hear what the geysers sound like. We'd also like to upgrade a lot of the seismic stations that are in Yellowstone. Some of them are getting a bit old, and we'd like to get them as modernized as possible with new equipment. So that's some of what we hope to do in Yellowstone. If you're interested in hearing more, our monitoring plan is available free online. You can see what we'd like to do over the next decade in terms of monitoring Yellowstone even better. Well, that's sort of a quick review of what's happened throughout 2022. Now let's talk about specifically what happened in December in terms of earthquake activity, ground deformation, and geyser activity.
December was a pretty quiet month for earthquakes in the Yellowstone region. The University of Utah seismograph stations, which monitors and operates the Yellowstone seismic network, located only about 70 earthquakes during the month. The largest was a magnitude 2.5. It was part of this Grizzly Lake sequence between Norris Geyser Basin and Mammoth Hot Springs. Now, this sequence actually started back in the summer, and it's a swarm that's been waxing and waning for many, many months. There were about 28 earthquakes during the month of December that contributed to this swarm, but over the course of the year, there have been over 1,000 earthquakes that have occurred in this area. The biggest month of this swarm was September, when there were over 500 events that occurred in this area. Now, this is part of a belt of seismicity that runs from Hebgen Lake all the way into north-central Yellowstone. It's the most seismically active area in the region, so it's not too much of a surprise that there's a swarm occurring right here. And in fact, just a few years ago in 2017, the Maple Creek earthquake swarm occurred not too far away, right in this area here. And that swarm saw over 2,400 earthquakes that occurred over a several-month period. That was back in 2017. So not too surprising. We occasionally get these swarms, and many of them are right in this belt between Hebgen Lake and the north-central part of Yellowstone. Turning now to deformation, this is vertical deformation at the White Lake GPS station on the east side of the caldera. Each one of these blue dots is 1 day of data. The whole plot spans 2 years. Downward trends indicate subsidence, and upward trends indicate uplift. And what we're seeing now is a continuation of trends that have been ongoing since 2015. That is, of overall subsidence of about 2 to 3 centimeters per year. That's about an inch a year. But during the summer months, there are these periods where the subsidence stalls or even turns to a bit of uplift. You can see it here in the summer of 2021 and again in the summer of 2022. And this occurs as groundwater is recharged by snowmelt, and the ground sort of soaks it up like a sponge getting wet. And it sort of puffs up the ground a little bit. And then once we get into the fall, the subsidence resumes. So you can see here in October, the subsidence resumed out here at White Lake. If we go to the other side of the caldera, this is a site near Old Faithful on the Mallard Lake Resurgent Dome. The same trends are apparent. This overall subsidence with the summertime uplift. And you can see that it was there in October that the subsidence resumed after that summer 2022 pause in subsidence and a small amount of uplift. Same thing true at Norris Geyser Basin as well. There wasn't a whole lot of deformation overall at Norris. A little bit of summertime uplift in 2021, then back to a bit of subsidence, a little bit of summertime uplift in 2022, and then back to a small amount of subsidence. There are a couple of transients in here. You can see this one in December, January of 2021, 2022, and then here in November, and a little bit one in December. This is caused by winter storms that put a lot of snow and ice onto the antennas, and that affects the GPS signal. But once that snow and ice melts off the antenna, then we get back to normal measures. So little storm signals here, but that's all we're seeing there. Otherwise, sort of normal trends, not a whole lot of deformation at Norris. And then finally, looking at Steamboat Geyser, the tallest geyser in the world. There was one eruption during the month of December, right here on December 6th. This is the temperature in the outflow channel. All of this sort of up and down activity are minor eruptions that culminate in a major, and after that major eruption, we see going back down to background temperatures, basically freezing. And then minor activity started up again here on December 18th. So it looks like Steamboat isn't quite done just yet. This minor activity may lead to another major water eruption of the geyser, perhaps early in 2023.
Well, that does it for the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory update for January 1st of 2023. Now remember, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to email us at yvowebteam, that's all one word, at usgs.gov. Stay safe, stay healthy, have a wonderful new year, happy 2023. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.